You're listening to another episode of the Coaster101 podcast. I'm Andrew Stillwell, and I'm joined on this week's podcast by two of my fellow members of the Coaster101 team who just got back from Coasterstock this past weekend. Please welcome to the podcast Nick Weisenberger. Nick, how's it going?
Pretty good. It's been a couple of days. I think I finally recovered from 2 full days at Kings Island.
Oh my gosh, you're not kidding. My feet still hurt. Speaking of people who do park marathons for fun, also joined on the podcast this week by Kyle Lindner, who followed up his trip to Coasterstock with a one-day trip from Ohio to DC and back to go to Six Flags America. Kyle, how are you awake right now?
I'm pretty tired, Andrew. Not gonna lie.
Okay, that's fair enough. You know, as I briefly mentioned, the weekend of July 9th and 10th, Nick, Kyle, and I, along with John Stevenson, the godfather himself of Coaster101.com, we spent, I think I counted like 35 and a half hours inside of Kings Island for Coasterstock, which is their annual Coaster Enthusiast event. There's ERT, there's behind-the-scenes tours, there's Q&A sessions. Honestly, we could talk about it, but we honestly wanted to educate the masses better about this event, which by all accounts is one of the best coaster enthusiasts. I feel like I can speak for the three of us that we have ever been to. But to give a little bit of background on Coasterstock, is one of the driving forces behind the event. He is a man with his own Wikipedia page. He is the world's biggest fan of the singing mushrooms at King's Dominion and the mountain gliders at Carowinds. Please welcome to the podcast the digital marketing manager for Kings Island, Don Helbig. Don, how's it going?
It's going great. Hope you guys had a great time this past weekend at Coasterstock. It's always an event that, it's fun to put together. And, I really enjoy seeing everyone's, reaction to it and just, hearing how everybody's 2 days have gone.
Absolutely. Yeah, this is, like I said, Kyle, I think you went to the very first Coasterstock, but it was a first-time event for both Nick and myself. But Don, I want to get into this before we get into Coasterstock. I want to get a little bit about you. Again, I've said off air, you're the most interesting man in the theme park world. You're our very own theme park Dos Equis man right now. But what is your personal history with Kings Island? I know you kind of grew up in that area. You've got the world record for the most rides on the racer, but what's your story as it relates to Kings Island, both from a fan and joining the park in the PR department?
Well, it goes back to really before Kings Island to Coney Island. And that was the big thing that my family would do every year. We would go Memorial Day, 4th of July, Labor Day. We lived about 15 minutes from Coney Island. So it was that big family thing. My cousins would come all the time. And then in 72, when Kings Island opened, a little further down the road for us, my dad referred to it as being out in the boondocks. So we couldn't go there as often. It had the outrageous price of $6 to get in. My dad wanted nothing to do with that as much either. But we would still go, once a year. So in the 70s, we would go make the annual trip. And then in 1981, I had my first season pass and started becoming a regular there. It all started really with I was working as a novelty vendor at Cincinnati Reds games. Major League Baseball went on strike. I didn't know how long it was going to last. I didn't want to go find another job because I didn't want to start. And then 3 or 4 days later, I had to leave that job to go back to the Reds. So I was just biding my time and, loving Kings Island. I thought perfect thing to do. I'll just go up here, a couple times a week, and a couple times a week became 5 days, 7 days as the strike, went on. But that first day I went up there that summer, and when the strike started, I was riding the racer. And I asked a girl who was one of the ride associates. We had just graduated from high school together. She lived up the street from me, and it was her first day working the ride. And I just said, do you know what the one-day record is? Well, she dug into it, and a few cycles later, she came back, and she said, yeah, it's 96 non-consecutive rides. So I tried to get that, ended up with 54, came back a couple of days later, would get 38, next day I would get 62, things like that. So those numbers started piling up. And the ride crew started becoming aware of what I was trying to do. They knew how many total rides I had. I remember coming back in the station ride 500. I knew it was my 500th ride. I didn't know the crew did. And it just really kind of evolved from there. And then on August 9th, I did break that one-day record in 1981. I had 97 rides that day. And then 5 days later, on August 14th, I ended up with my 1,000th ride. That night, I reported back to work at Riverfront State, and the strike had ended. So I was back to work that night. But that's really how it got started. And then it just kind of, became what it did. I came back the next year. That season alone, I finished the first year with 1,200 rides on the racer. The next year, that season alone, I had 2,211. So now I'm at 3,400 rides going into year 3. I thought, it's still fun. Maybe I'll get to 5,000. At 5,000, I'm still having as much fun as I always did. And it wasn't something I really set out to do to try to hit any magic number on the racer. But I always said as long as it was fun, I was going to keep going. But it ended up in 1990, 10,000 rides on the racer. So I did that over 10 seasons, but also enjoyed the rest of the park. I noticed when you guys were at Coasterstock, it wasn't just about the roller coasters. You did everything. You watched the shows, and you went to the shops, you rode other rides, and that's what I did. I mean, I was, became known for riding the racer,
Right.
but it was the overall park experience. I mean, just the atmosphere that I got caught up in, and it just happened to be because I was there so often that I got those numbers on those things. So that was kind of how I got involved with Kings Island. And then after the 10,000th ride, I still went up to the park, didn't ride with that kind of frequency anymore in the racer, but was still around it all the time. And I started in 1990 after the 10,000th ride, started working in professional hockey and did that for 18 years in marketing, PR, broadcast positions before joining the Kings Island marketing team in 2007.
Wow. I've got to ask a question here, because you talk about, you've got these dates down to a science. I mean, what kind of records are you keeping? Do you have like a journal that's like, hey, I rode the racer a dozen times today? And do you have it like broken down by blue side, red side? Or I'm so curious about this. I don't want to call it a fascination with numbers, but following you on social media, you've got dates for everything. Is it just like that background of working in, marketing and PR and professional hockey and keeping those like statistics, or what is the fascination, and how do you keep your records?
Well, it really goes back to playing Little League Baseball. I always wanted to keep track of my stats, so I knew if I went, got 2 hits in this game and 4 or 5 at bats, what my batting average was going to be, and then started playing hockey. I kept track of my stats with that. So it really started as a sports fan, at age 8, 9, 10, keeping the numbers on that. But then going to Kings Island, I would take the park map and put the date on it, and I would write down what I wrote, throw it in the glove compartment, and those things just added up. But that's how I started keeping track of it. I mean, it wasn't any, really sophisticated way of doing it. It was just writing it down on a park map.
Okay.
Just putting the date on it at the beginning with that. But it was always, about the numbers. I thought it would be interesting to see, how I use my season pass, what my average rides per day would be, what I went to the most. So nothing, that I thought was going to evolve into what it did, but it was just kind of, my way of seeing how I spent my day.
What's the total number as of this recording on the 15th of July?
At Kings Island, I have 29,950 rides that I've done, and that's every attraction that park has ever had that I've been on.
Got it.
But it's just, I just start, when you start doing something like that, it's just something you keep doing. It was always fun for me to play the numbers, just the average rides per day, just break it down that way. And, going back to, you mentioned, my hockey days, working in hockey, you had to know all the numbers, when you're broadcasting games, you have to know you don't have time to thumb through game notes and try to say, oh yeah, this guy's 6'2", 295 pounds from Moose Jaw, Saskatchewan. You don't have time for that. You have to know those things. So just that memory was there, but just things that I think for me, things that stand out, as I remember those milestones, I remember the dates of all those milestone rides. I remember the dates of, when Pete Rose, got his 3,000th hit, when I was there, Johnny Bench night, when he hit his, final home run, just those kind of things, because they're, what I was associated with or what I love doing, and being around sports, being around amusement parks. So those dates come to mind. Now, if you were to ask me, what day did you graduate high school? I couldn't, I just know it was 1981. I couldn't tell you what the day was. I couldn't even name my school teachers, so I guess that means that didn't matter as much as the sports and my amusement park rides. But, it's just certain things that, I remember. And I think it's just because that's what my life has always been about, is sports and amusement and theme parks,
Got it.
And so for me, it just came naturally that way.
Okay. I've got to ask, you're married, correct?
Yes.
Do you remember your wedding anniversary? We just need to confirm this.
I do that because it was a week before Christmas. It was December 18th.
Okay, perfect. Wonderful. Well, I want to talk coaster stock now. We just finished the 6th edition of coaster stock, but how did coaster stock kind of get its start?
When I came to Kings Island in 2007, we did not have an annual coaster enthusiast type event like other parks had. You had Coaster Mania at Cedar Point. Holiday World has its annual event. There's so many others around the country. And we did not have that. It was something I wanted to do, but in order to do it, it had to be different than what other parks were doing because those were established. But it also had to be something we were ready to do it. It had to be the right time. You have to get buy-in from every department at Kings Island to really make the event work and be as successful as it has been. I have to make sure that the general manager's on board. The marketing director has to be on board giving that date up, for that event. You have to have operations, safety, security. They all have to be on board with what you're trying to do here. The food and beverage team has to be on board with it. Everybody has to be as excited about that event as I am. And that includes the ride operators. They all have to be part of this to make it work the way I wanted it to. And so that takes a little bit of time. But I also wanted to spend some time. I had gone to other events before I started working at Kings Island. I went to a couple after working at Kings Island. I, kept track and made a list of the things I really liked about these events and the things that I didn't like. One of the things I didn't like was during the ERT sessions, it was basically an extension. You got to ride the rides earlier, you got to ride them later at night, but it really wasn't any different than riding the ride middle of the day in terms of the wait time and things like that. I didn't want that to be part of our event. So that's where the capacity limit, came in. I wanted to make sure that everybody who came to this event, it was a good value for you. That if you wanted to ride the beast 5-10 times at night, you could. If you wanted to ride everything 3 or 4 times that was on the ERT list in the morning at night, you could. So capping the event was something that I had to make sure that I could do that. It wasn't going to be about just selling as many tickets as we could. I wanted it to be a great experience for everybody. So just things like that. And then I, spoke with about 10, 12 people who had gone to a lot of events. I'd known them for 20, 30 years. And I wanted to collaborate with them. What do you like about these events? What you don't like? And then I started putting that all together into what became Coasterstock. So it was really about a 3 or 4 year process of trying to just gather all that information, put something together that was going to, work from year one, because you don't want to start something and then not be able to sustain it. I wanted something that was going to be sustainable and that was going to be here long before, long after I'm gone, the Coasterstock still continues. That's what I wanted to build it into. But, it was just really just doing a lot of research. Banshee was being unveiled in 2014. ACE had its spring conference that year, so that wasn't going to be the year to launch it. So really, it was the idea for it was conceived somewhere between 2013 2014, the start of that season, and then as we got later in that summer, fall of 2014 is when it went from paper into let's put this in motion and start planning on this for the 2015 season.
Nice.
So for this year's Coasterstock, when did you start planning this event?
The day that we had to refund everybody's tickets last year.
Okay.
We already started planning on it. We really started the hardest part was trying to find a date that was going to work. We had to wait till our operating calendar became official and had been released. We traditionally had held this event the weekend before Memorial Day. We weren't going to be open on that Friday this year. So that meant we had to find another date. One of the things I never wanted to do with this event was have it compete head-to-head with another event or be the week before, the week after, where coaster enthusiasts, theme park fans, they had to choose which one they were going to do because they couldn't do both. I didn't want to put anybody in that position. So there had to be some distance between other events. So when we looked at this year's calendar, you had events in June, including the ACE summer conference. Then you had the 4th of July was coming up. So the weekend that it was going to work was going to be July 9th and 10th if we were going to do it. So we moved it to that date. So once we knew, probably for us, it was probably a late January, February when we knew this is ideally what our operating calendar is going to be. That's when we started to make the plans and started putting the rest of it together.
And I want to, obviously, planning events right now in the time of COVID is a pretty difficult thing. I mean, how was it planning and trying to nail down dates and tours and things like that when the global climate, as it were, was kind of ever changing?
The one thing that wasn't going to happen was I wasn't looking forward to moving or having the event this year if we were still going to be in a situation where we were only going to be able to run half full trains. It had to be full capacity on the trains, or it wasn't coaster stock. The value wasn't going to be there. Even
Mhm.
with the same number of people, you were going to double the wait time on all the rides. We wouldn't have been able to do the tours in the big groups like we did. We wouldn't have been able to have everybody in the theater for the guest speakers. We would have had to break everybody up in the dinner into 6 or 7 different shelters. So until we got the green light that we were going to be able to start filling all the trains and that they could all be together, at one time for the meals, and we could do the tours, and that's when we knew we could move forward with the event. So it wasn't going to be until the value that, what everybody in everybody's mind, what coaster stock is, the experience they'd had in the past. We wanted to make sure that still was going to be able to live up to that name of coaster stock, what they become accustomed to, before we were going to be able to move forward with it this year.
Got it. And I guess from that first year in 2015, how has the event evolved over the years in your eyes?
I think the way it's evolved is it's become more of like that, like a coming home for a lot of the attendees, family, big family reunion, family get together type thing. The first year, everyone's interested in the ERT and they're interested in the tours, and then they make some new friends. That first coaster stock, they come back. The next year, they start to reconnect with the people they met the year before. Now they're meeting additional friends. So that's really how it's evolved, is just the friendships and things that have been developed from this event. We've had 3 different people that have met their future spouse from this event. So things like that, that's the way it's evolved, just the friendships and just people being excited to see each other. And, so many people, if we didn't have any rides for the ERT, I think everybody still would have had a good time this past weekend.
Absolutely. I mean, you touch on that a little bit. I wrote a little bit about it in our blog, which if you haven't read, be sure to check it out. Coaster101.com, search Coasterstock. It's among the multitudes of content that we have produced out of this event. So spoiler, that was great for us. But, I talked a little bit about how Justin from CP Food Blog, who is a notorious hater of podcasts, but hopefully he'll listen to this one. He'd been trying to get me to come to Coaster Stock for a couple of years, and he's like, come on, it's like a family reunion. It's totally different than any other coaster event you've been to. And I was like, yeah, okay, sure, whatever, you're blowing smoke. But he truly wasn't lying. I mean, not that he would, but it was like there was no embellishment there. It was like as you said, Don, it was a family reunion of sorts, and I definitely came away with some friends that weekend for sure.
That was the goal, going into it, was to create an event that was different than the others, and that it wasn't about, the ERT. It wasn't about adding to your coaster credits. It was about the chance to, unite or reconnect with like-minded people from all over the country and just having a great time for a couple of days.
For sure.
So, Don, I know you kind of already touched on this, but as far as your team's goals that have been met in the last 6 years, and then where do you see some goals changing moving forward?
Well, I think the main thing for us, I mean, like I said, it's a limited, capacity event, so it's definitely not about, selling the most tickets. But what we want to, our goals is to have people leave the event and it's 2 of the best days of the summer for them. And that they're taking, memories from those 2 days, and it's something they're going to remember 15, 20, 30 years from now. They're still going to be talking about coaster stock. They might be talking about the potato salad they had during the first meal, on that first day of the event. But just things like that, just a little thing. So really, when you talk about goals for us, it's just, just making sure year after year that everybody just has a great time, and it's something they look forward to doing again the next year.
I resemble that comment about the potato salad, but that's another conversation for another episode. But Kyle and Nick and Don, I'm going to get you to chime in here too. Let's actually talk our experience at Coaster Stock. We're 20 minutes into this podcast, and people probably want to know exactly what we did and how our weekend was. And I know while the event isn't about ERT, there was ERT on 21, and I'm going to use different in air quotes here because you had Flight of Fear with the lights on and off, Mystic Timbers day and night, but you had 21 different ride experiences over 2 days of ERT, and that was everything from the Beast to Orion to Shake, Rattle, and Roll to the King's Mills Antique Autos. Nick and Kyle, what was your favorite ERT ride, and what was something memorable about ERT?
The most memorable ERT experience for me was definitely the night rides on Mystic Timbers, especially the we actually rode it during the fireworks, which was actually, I guess, before the ERT started. But yeah, riding Mystic Timbers at night during fireworks was really awesome, and you can't go wrong with the Beast at night.
Yeah, I second Nick's comment there about the Beast. Just growing up, going to Kings Island, getting the night ride on the Beast was always like that treat at the end of the day. And at Coasterstock, I think I told you guys, like, I don't remember ever having a ride that dark on the Beast. Like, I know in past years there's been like a light down in the helix or at the bottom of the first drop, and there was nothing, and it was just amazing.
Yeah, one question I was going to ask Don is, how do you determine which rides to include in ERT, and when, if they're a morning ERT or if it's a nighttime? Is there a science behind that?
There is. One of the things that we need to do, especially with the morning part of it, is we're trying to get the park ready to open that day. So there's still areas of the park where we have vehicle traffic. They're stocking the different food locations, and they're still, power washing the streets and that. So we have to kind of keep things that, in a certain footprint for the morning part of it. That's why, you saw we had Rivertown, where we had the train tour that you could do. We had Mystic Timbers. We had Diamondback, and then we had a couple of rides in Plan Snoopy. So they're right next to each other. So that way we could work in Coney Mall. We could work in Action Zone and get the park ready to open, because everyone's in 2-3 hours before the park opens. So in the morning, you have to be, more in a tighter footprint. So you can't be as wide as you are at night. When you stretch from, the Racer, then it went all the way down Coney Mall. You mentioned Kings Mills Antique Autos, around the Shake, Rattle, and Roll, went to Backlot Stunt Coaster, over to the Beast, and then into Rivertown, where you had Mystic Timbers and that. So we can use a larger footprint at night. Can't have the whole park open. But that's why in the morning it's always going to be a tighter footprint, and it can be expanded a little bit more at night.
And that's kind of goes back to what you were talking about earlier, where you got to have the buy-in of all the different groups. You got to have the coordination with the operations and all those people.
Exactly. Exactly. And especially like our safety and security team, because when you have all these people coming in the park at the same time, you get real excited. They're taking pictures and doing other things. And then all of a sudden here, you have that potential, that vehicle, pedestrian conflict and things like that. So that's why we always try to make sure everybody stays in a certain area at that time of the morning. And it works that way.
I love it. And Nick and Kyle, I gotta ask you guys, because I didn't get the opportunity to ride it because body dimensions are ridiculous. Flight of Fear with the lights on, how does it compare as an experience to Flight of Fear with the lights off?
I think it's totally different, obviously, but like just constant head choppers is a totally different experience than, pitch black, not knowing if you're upside or down or not. So that was really cool. That's always been like on my bucket list, was a lights on ride on Flight of Fear.
Yeah, it's almost scarier, with more unnerving with the lights on, because you can see all those supports that were going everywhere. I
also want to touch on the behind the scenes tour, and we had 4 of those during Coasterstock. Started with that the behind the scenes of the Kings Island Miami Valley Railroad that Don mentioned earlier. Also on day 1, we had a walkback on Beast where we went all the way back in the woods. I mean, we got in the helix and we got angles that you can't even really dream of. Then day 2 obviously was the Banshee tour, and then we had another behind the scenes tour of Orion and Racer, kind of in the drizzling rain, but it really didn't stop anybody. What did you guys appreciate most about those tours? And then Don, I will come to you after they're done talking. Kind of ask, following up on Nick's earlier question, how was the decision made to give certain tours on certain roller coasters on certain days, etc.? But Nick, go first.
I really like the Orion behind the scenes tour, just because I'd done the Beast tour once before for another event before Coasterstock, but I was really surprised that we were able to walk literally like the entire length of the coaster, and it's a lot longer than you think it is, like going all the way back there. So that was really cool to see those views that you can't get any other time.
Yeah, I really appreciate the behind the scenes tours at Coasterstock, because it's not like you're just on the other side of the fence. They don't just let you in a little bit and you can take a picture that you probably could get inside the fence. and just being able to walk back, what seemed like, half a mile back the beast and like clear down the whole length of Orion. It's something that you can't get every day, and that makes it special.
And I think for me, standing inside the double helix finale of the Beast was probably the highlight. Just being able to stand in the middle of that, having the coaster be completely around you, 360 degrees. It's awesome.
Yeah, it was nuts. And I think I told you guys as we were hanging out on the second day, I said those behind the scenes tours, take away the ERT, take away the food, which we'll get to in a little bit, take away everything. Those behind the scenes tours were worth the price of admission for me. And I'm a roller coaster photography nerd. I mean, I'm not very good at it. I've just got my little point and shoot camera, and there's the young kid who's got a camera lens on his camera that's probably more than a month's rent of my apartment. And, he was out there taking pictures with his dad, and it's stuff like that you just love to see. But those angles, I got some really good pictures of, I'm thinking of one right now that was like it was Diamondback during the Beast Tour, and it was all the coaster enthusiasts taking pictures of Mystic Timbers and Diamondback. And then you've got Diamondback's train coming down like that bunny hill, right? Kind of mid course. It was so cool to be able to do those things. But Don, do you guys have just like a list of tours in your back pocket that you just kind of rotate year to year? Or is it, obviously it's Kings Island, the Beast will most of the time be involved, but is it, how does the tour selection, how does that happen year to year?
Well, you think about what's going to be of the most interest to the attendees, and obviously it is the Beast. Orion being new, no one had ever gone back behind the scenes for that. But it also has, what can you do without interfering with park operation? What can you do, safely to make sure that no one's getting into an area, that they shouldn't, those kind of things. You mentioned earlier about the way the event has evolved. The Beast tours, we used to do those in the first few years of Coasterstock. We would break it up into groups, be group A, B, C, and D, and each have a different time slot, and we would take them station to station and move around. You'd see one drop, shot coming down the first drop, then you'd move on to the second lift hill, then you might move on, going over the tunnels, things like that. 2019, I decided to put everybody together and just kind of make it more of a self-guided tour, get the shots that you wanted. Everybody seemed to enjoy that a lot more and just kind of go at their own pace with it. And so that's what we did with that one. As we were doing the Orion behind the scenes tour, as the, rain was coming down a little bit, I started thinking, well, next time we do this, I think I'm going to bring them in a different way, because you start seeing the shots that everyone's trying to get. And you think, well, I could have done that better if I'd have brought them in this way. They would have had some better shots and things. So those are the kind of things that, you look at, and then you already know the next time this is how it's going to be for that. But the Beast, no matter how many times somebody does that, and I've been going back there, for parts of 40 years now, behind the scenes, there's always something that you see that you didn't see the time before. And that's what always makes that such a great tour. It just never gets old back there with that. But there's some other things. The train, we've done that differently. We've had where everybody has gone back to the engine house, and we had both engines out, and they talked about it back there. We've had to where everybody got on the train in the station, and then it backed into the engine house, and they talked back there. I think the way we did it this year made it more personable, where everybody could get up in the cab if they wanted. They could walk around the train, get some great photos. I know our conductors and engineers, they really enjoyed talking to everybody. So those are the kind of things that, we try to put new wrinkles in it every year. It might look on paper like it's the same thing, but it never is. It's always a little bit differently than we've done it the year before.
I love it.
That's why you got to keep going back year after year.
There you go, Nick, with the hard sell. I love it.
A lot of people, they kept asking me like, hey, can we do we had a maintenance shop, tour at Coasterstock. And I'm like, well, we could, but at that time of the year, if you like looking at empty walls and a floor, we'll take you in there because all the ride parts, they're all out in the park right now. All the rides are going. So there wouldn't be a lot to see if we were to do that during the Coasterstock event.
I love it. In addition to the ERT and the behind the scenes tour, even if you're not a big coaster person, I mean, there's some things that are, I feel like, fairly unique to Coasterstock that you don't see at a lot of other coaster events. Obviously, you guys, for the first time this year, you had a KI-opoly or Kings Island-opoly tournament. But I want to talk about the chicken dance.
The chicken dance.
How did the chicken dance kind of come to be?
The chicken dance came to be in 2019. That some of the attendees, we had a group that had come down to the event from Canada, from Toronto area, and they gathered up. They talked about it during the morning ERT, and they kind of just did it on their own. They made me aware of it, and after it was done, they had so much fun. I thought, well, that's something we need to make a staple of this event, because they were all having fun with it. And others, after they saw what they had done, because I was able to capture it, I posted it on the Coasterstock at Kings Island Facebook group. Everybody's like, oh, I wish we'd known that you were going to do that. We would have joined in. So it became part of the lineup because everybody had fun with it. But that was one of the things too. And, we go back to the beginning of the conversation about gathering information before, this event ever came to be. Just what can we do? And one of the things I noticed, and other people, that I collaborated with, was there wasn't always activities between the ERT and lunch. So you had ERT, you had lunch, and then you waited till the night to have ERT. I wanted to have some activities going on, something, throughout the day, and something like the chicken dance. I mean, that's perfect. The park opens, 45 minutes later, everybody gathers in front of the fest house, and it's just a fun time. It's simple, but so much fun.
Yeah, I will say we did miss out on that. With no offense to the chicken dance, but I think we were on the railroad at that point. So I think next year we're in for the chicken dance. Don't put that in writing though. But also another unique thing you guys had this year was Coasterstock Feud, which our buddy Kyle Kruthofer, he hosted. It was Team Don against Team Chad, and Don, when I say this, I'm not trying to bring up bad blood here, but you got dealt a pretty rough hand by Kyle in that game that kind of, I feel like, cost you the victory there.
It did, but it was just it was a fun time. And you mentioned the Coasterstock Feud, that came about like 3 or 4 coaster stocks ago, and it was 15 minutes before we did it when I said, hey, it'd be fun, let's play this game. We're all, it was out in the picnic row. We used to have the guest speakers out there, and that's another change that happened this year, was taking the guest speakers from the catering part of the event and making it its own separate event when we put it in the Showplace Theater. But, I just gathered the people that are helping with the event that year, and I said, let's go gather 10 people. Let's play a little game. We'll call it the Coasterstock Feud.
Love it.
And everybody loved it, and it just became a staple, part of the event. So I've already got a couple of things next year that would be in addition to that, which would be interactive and fun as well.
Okay.
Who came up with those questions? Because those questions were hard.
Combination Kyle and I. We didn't want it to be, a cakewalk where it was just too easy and everybody in the crowd loses interest if you just say, what year did the Eiffel Tower open? You don't want to have it like that. You want to have a little thought into it. You want to have the audience play along with you and try to, take as much time trying to figure out the answers and make it as intriguing for them as it is the contestants.
Yeah, I think we were sitting in the stands, like, John, who's with us, he's local to Dollywood and I'm local to Carowinds. And we were like, we couldn't answer this level of questions about our own home park. So we were really, really in the weeds on some of the Kings Island questions. So it was definitely very interesting. But you brought up the Q&A sessions, and we heard from Chef Major, who I coincidentally saw on Chopped last night on a rerun, and we heard from the Vice President and General Manager of Kings Island, Mike Kuntz. And then on day 2, we heard from Evan Ponstingle, past podcast guest Evan Ponstingle, even though he didn't mention us. He mentioned Coaster Radio. Evan, if you're listening to this, I apologize. I mean, you let me down. It's okay, though. And then we also heard from the Gravity Group, who retracked the racer. But Kyle, I'll start with you, and then I'll go to Nick. Who was your favorite guest speaker, and what was something you took away from their talk?
I really enjoyed the Gravity Group guys, just because they can talk a little bit more technical about how they can take a wooden coaster and make it brand new again. And that fascinates me. You get all these coasters that start to get old. You can tell they're getting rougher, and being able to bring those back to life is just crazy. And all of the equipment and knowledge that goes into that, it's just really cool to see them talk about that.
Yeah, as an engineer, I agree on that. Listening to the Gravity Group talk about reprofiling the racer was really interesting. It was also cool. I read the Evans Kings Island book, so it was really cool. Put a name, a face to the name, and see like, oh, this is the person who wrote the book, and this is how passionate he is about it.
He's super well spoken for like a 17-year-old kid too.
It's crazy.
It's nuts. And like, I host a podcast for a fake living, and he is far better well spoken than I am. So that
I
was
think he's got a bright future in theme parks.
He definitely does.
Yeah, the interesting thing about Evan too, you talk about how well spoken and that he is. Before he went out there, I said, Evan, you have about 10 minutes before we have to bring the gravity group out, and he was right at 10 minutes.
Wow.
And normally, as much information as he could talk about that book with everybody, and people would listen for an hour, 2 hours, to what he has to say. I mean, he kept it right to 10 minutes. So, I mean,
impressive.
Yeah, right. Very impressive young man.
Oh my gosh, he's sharp. And like Nick said, bright future ahead of him, even if he doesn't mention our podcast when he talks to other people. It's fine. I'd be remiss if I didn't talk about the food we had during Coasterstock, both the catered dinners, also the donuts on Friday morning were fantastic. But the catered dinners, I'll start with Friday night's meal, which was hamburgers, hot dogs. Nick, what you think about the catered meals? And I've never had a catered meal like that at a park before, I feel like.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. It's probably the best catered meal I've had at any park or any coaster event before. It's just like everything was really good. Like there's nothing bad to say about any of it.
Yeah, I agree. The hands down best buffet dinner at a theme park, and probably outside of a theme park as well. I'm kind of a foodie myself, and just being able to have like not just like a frozen prepackaged type meal for a buffet I really appreciated that. And just to see like the effort there was really cool.
I mean, the smokehouse dinner Saturday night, I'm still thinking about that. The barbecue and the sausages and the chicken. And I mean, Don mentioned it earlier, and this is back from the first night, but I'm still thinking about that potato salad. So it's just, Don, when you guys do Coasterstock, is the plan to typically go all out on food like that? Or was that not a happy accident, but it was like, did you just kind of give Chef Major the ball and say, go with it?
Chef Major, when he came on board at the park, heard about this event, he wanted to make sure that, he was able to just showcase the different, food and things that we have available in the park. So it's really elevated since he's been there the last, 3 Coasterstocks. But we always tried to make it, again, it's the big meal. Everybody's together. We had guest speakers at one time back there. So you want to make that more than just a meal. You want to make it, a little bit more of, an event within an event. For
sure. And the last thing I want to talk about, I'm going to address the elephant in the room about the Coasterstock contests. You guys gave away several awards. There happens to be an award over here over my left shoulder that's sitting on my bookshelf proudly. We were lucky enough to win the Coasterstock Social Media Rockstar Award. So shout out to anybody else who was trying to win, but we got the trophy, and I'm going to try and stay as humble about that as possible. But Don, when you guys are, judging these contests and the best photo, the best video, kind of what is going through your head to kind of capture? I know the photo contests and video contests were the spirit of Coasterstock. How do you guys judge those contests, and kind of what's your mindset on judging those contests?
Well, for the one that you won, it's very easy for us to know who should get that award because of all the analytics. We can track what the sentiment is. We can track what the impressions were, the reach, the engagement that your content is getting. So it's very easy to, how much influence you have with the followers. So that is very easy for us just with the tools that we have to do all the monitoring. So that's something that, it's going to tell us who's won that contest. It's a collaborative discussion, with 3-4 people to talk about the photo contest or the video contest. We didn't have a lot of entries with the video contest. That was something new this year. Mm-hmm. Those are the two that I think, we've got a pretty good thing going with the social media rockstar part of it. Lots and lots of, like I said, it was very competitive, with that. But the other ones, I think we need to do a lot of work on it, make those better, find a way that, more people want to enter their photos. Maybe it's something you submit those photos in advance and we turn it over to to the Coaster Stock attendees, let them vote. Maybe during the meal, the first day they're all on display, and they get to put a number in a bucket. Which one that they vote. They vote for the one that they think, and maybe that's the way to do it. Just take it out of our hands, and maybe get a little bit more participation if everybody knows that they can do this in advance and just pick a Kings Island photo that you like. And with that, the video one's a little more complicated on how to really do that.
Mm-hmm.
So that's still a work in progress. But then, you had the Monopoly Champion and the scavenger hunt is something that, we maybe could evolve that going into the future year into something else
Mm-hmm.
to make it a little more interactive and have teams of people trying to win something there.
Love it. Nick, Kyle, before we kind of move on to looking ahead to future Coaster Stocks, anything else you guys want to discuss or bring up?
For the video contest you were just talking, it seems like it would have to be something that could just be filmed like in one take. I think that's the problem. Like if people want to edit a video montage or something, you don't have time to do that during the event. So you're either going to be at the park enjoying it, or you're going to be too tired when you get back to your hotel. But
That's a good point. Yeah, there was no chance we were going to be editing videos, speaking for ourselves in between day one and day two. And I know, Don, we came up to you first thing on Saturday morning on day two, and we're like, "How much did you sleep?" He goes, "Yeah, you're like 3-4 hours, about the same as you guys." So editing a video on top of that would have been a challenge. But congrats to the photo contest winner, the video contest winner, scavenger hunt winner.
Yeah, and we've tried that different ways with those contests. Like I said, with the photos, and there's been 6 years of Coaster Stack. There's been 5 different ways of trying to do that. So we still have to find a way to really make that better.
I love it. Well, Don, now that Coaster Stock 2021 is in the books, have you guys started planning for Coaster Stock 2022? And what can you give us as an exclusive for the Coaster 101 podcast? And I know the answer is nothing, but I have to ask that question anyway.
Well, I mean, there's things that, we would tweak and to make things better. A couple of the tours a little bit better. I think we would add maybe one additional tour, do something way differently than we did. Take the attendees to a place that most of them have not gone yet. So we can do that with it.
Okay.
I think you'll definitely see different elements of the contest to make that, have more participation in them. I think we would want to, the KI, Opoly tournament that we had, the 16 people that started with that, I mean, there wasn't anybody else that could see what they were doing. So maybe, you have a live stream of that people can go to the Facebook group and watch what's happening in there because everybody was curious about it. So, things like that. But there'll be some different, some different wrinkles to it. There'll be some different, the lineup will be switched up a little bit with that. I think we found that it does work better to have the guest speakers separate from the catering event with that. So it kind of stands on its own that way. We've always made it a point to have at least one guest speaker. And this year we had 2 with the 2 from Gravity Group, but at least one from outside of the park. So you're hearing from somebody that works somewhere else in the industry with that, or has, past ties to Kings Island in some fashion. Like we've had Dennis Spiegel come in a couple of times and be a guest speaker. So, you'll see some things with that. The 50th anniversary, there's going to have to be some tie-ins, obviously with the 50th anniversary that we're going to want to put some of that into the event as well too.
And that's what makes me want to, looking forward to coming back next year. It's just like you're talking about, it's an evolution. So it's never going to be exactly the same as the year before. So that makes it very repeatable and want to come back every year.
Now, one of the questions I, get is because it isn't a limited number of tickets, the ones that don't get a chance to get back in when tickets go on sale, they've been to 2 or 3, but they didn't get in that time. They always want us to expand the capacity, increase it. But if we do that, it's not as good of an event because now there's too many people on a tour, or it's going to take you another, 10 minutes maybe to get on a ride or something during one of the ERT sessions. So I don't want to tamper with the formula that's made it a great value for everybody in terms of, being able to get in all the rides that you want, being able to do the tours that we do, because the bigger the group, the less you can do behind the scenes.
I want to talk just while we've got you about the rest of the year at Kings Island as far as big events go. This past weekend, I mean, it starts this coming weekend, but through the magic of podcasting, this past weekend, you guys welcome Grand Carnival back. You've also got Halloween Haunt and Winterfest. What's the rest of 2021 look like at Kings Island?
Well, as you mentioned, Grand Carnival, going on. We had that in 2019, that event. It's spectacular. I think, for sure, in the 15 seasons that I've been involved at Kings Island, the two best things that we've done have been Grand Carnival and Winterfest. And I go back to my days as a guest, and I don't see anything that's matched those two that I can remember. So, two events that our guests, if you can get to the park to experience those two, they're must see events with that. And then by the time we get done with the Grand Carnival, we're into August. We're in those final days of daily operation. The temperature does heat up, so it's a great time to come out to do Soak City. Then you get to Labor Day, and it's on to Haunt, Tricks and Treats Fall Fest. That event, perfect for families. That'll be back this fall, and then Winterfest is here. So that's really what the rest of the season looks like right now. And then preparations for the 50th anniversary. There's a lot of discussions going on, putting that event together. So we're still in the planning stages. Nothing has been decided, what it's going to be at the moment, but we're getting closer to that, and you'll start to see some things come out about that, as we get into the fall and then toward Winterfest.
I love it. And in celebration of the 50th anniversary, Kings Island is building I'm kidding. I'm 100% kidding. That's a joke. Anything else you guys want to talk and discuss before we let Don go? He's given us far too much of his very valuable time, and again, might still be a little sleep deprived from Coasterstock, and it's been about a week at this point.
I just want to thank Don and everybody else at Kings Island for putting on such an awesome event. And it wasn't just an event either. It was the entire park. Like everything there was great, like from top to bottom. So I was really impressed by Kings Island's past weekend.
Cosign, absolutely. Even like the ride-ups in the station. I mean, I remember we were just like catching ourselves, just kind of chuckling to each other at the things the ride-ups were saying. It's like, enjoy your ride on Adventure Express. It's pretty okay. It's just like,
just little things that just make it a lot more fun.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, I totally agree. Just, being at quite a few parks this summer and kind of get an idea for like the quality out there. Kings Island just like totally exceeded that this year.
Way above the
compared to other years too, and you could just tell from the ride ups to like even the food and desserts now that you guys have that like James Major was saying, everything's made in-house from local ingredients, and it shows. It totally shows. We had two amazing meals at the Miami River Brew House, like best nachos I've ever had. I had them both days and ate the whole thing twice. And then we had the cinnamon bread and the blue ice cream truffles, which are amazing.
Yeah, I was going to ask about the cinnamon bread if you'd had a chance to try that.
We did. We got it. And like we mentioned, John is he's a Dollywood homer. We'll call him a Dollywood homer. We love him. We love him for it. So he was skeptical, but I think he enjoyed his cinnamon bread, and I know we all did as well. So it was delicious. And if I could provide one piece of like asking for something, if we could get those sugar or the Sweet Spot sugar cookies on the Kings Island online shop, that would just be a game changer.
From the Sweet Spot, yeah, I'll run it up the flagpole for you.
There we go. This is why we love having an audience with you, Don, because even our ridiculous suggestions, you at least humor us by saying you'll run it up the flagpole. So thank you very much for that. Don, while we got you, anything else you would like to tell our audience?
Well, it was great having you guys out at the park. You obviously had a lot of fun, but what I liked about you guys and so many of the people too that came to Coasterstock is it wasn't just about the roller coasters. You enjoyed the whole park, and I think anybody listening to this, when you go to a park, naturally ride your favorite roller coasters, but do everything.
Yes.
Think back to when you were a kid. I mean, you loved riding the carousel as a kid. No matter what age you are, still try it again. Things like that. Just watch some shows. Try some different foods. Just really experience the whole park when you go there, because a park is more than just the roller coasters.
Amen to that. Well, that's going to do it for this week's episode of the Coaster 101 podcast. Thanks again, Don, for your time. Make sure you're following Don on Twitter. He does tweet ups from time to time in the park. He's on Twitter at Don Helbig, Helbig. You should also be following Kings Island on all of their social media platforms. They're Kings Island PR on Twitter and Instagram. I believe Visit Kings Island on Facebook. But while you're following Kings Island and everything, make sure you're following us on everything. We're at Coaster101 anywhere you consume social media. We also have a website that is chock full of content about our trip to Coasterstock and other parks as well, but mainly Coasterstock for the past week because there was just that much to write about. If you're listening to this podcast, make sure you're liking, rating, reviewing, subscribing, all of those podcast buzzwords that help other people find our show, because the more people who listen, the more quality guests like Don we were able to attract for our podcast. Thanks, as always, to JM Music Design, who actually directed and produced 3 of the live shows at Kings Island, believe it or not, Busker Jam, Sticky Paint, and Brew Beats. So shout out to those guys for our theme music. And that's going to do it for this week, and we will talk to y'all again soon. See ya.